This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome you all to Webi Criticare 2020. So we have covered most of the cardiac critical care topics. We have left with the arrhythmias and heart-lung interaction as well as pulmonary embolism. The two most important procedure or maneuver which is important in critical care, like 2D echocardiography and ultrasound, is left actually. 2D echocardiography, Dr. Rajit, cardiologist, going to discuss maybe next week or after 2 weeks. So today we will discuss about the role of ultrasound in critical ill patients. So ultrasound is at most important while managing cardiac patient as well, along as we manage in respiratory critical care. This is also very important in cardiac critical care. So to discuss ultrasound role, we have speaker Dr. Shweta Gowda. Welcome, ma'am. Madam is consult anesthesiologist from Chirayu Hospital, Gadag. And also we have to moderate this session, we have Dr. Guru Prasadian, consultant intensivist anesthesiologist, Chirayu Critical Care, Gadag. The whole Gadag team is here now. Welcome, Dr. Guru Prasad sir and Dr. Shweta madam.
Thank you.
So
thank you, Raghu.
Over to Dr. Guru Prasad sir.
Thank you, Raghu. I take this opportunity to thank Webi Criticare 2020 for giving us this opportunity to talk on this very good topic, that is lung ultrasound. Dr. Raghunath and Dr. Lakshmikant are my guru in critical care. I may be guru, but they are my guru in critical care, always motivating and helping us to learn more. I have learned a lot from them. So coming back to the topic now, why lung ultrasound is important. Usually when a patient comes to a casualty, first thing we do is a physical examination. But what we do find is insufficient. It's insufficient for a fine diagnosis. So the other thing what we use is a bedside chest radiography, which may be of limited accuracy. Similarly, chest CT. Next, the problem is, especially in critical care and emergency care, is the risk of transportation and limited availability in different places. So to bridge a gap between the chest X-ray and chest CT, lung ultrasound is very important because it is easily available and it is low cost and you can use it repeatedly. So some of the conditions which really lung ultrasound helps is, the most commonest presentation in our casualty is shortness of breath. So when a patient who comes breathless, if you have to get a diagnosis as early as possible, it is ultrasound which helps, and lung ultra, you should be good in lung ultrasound as well as 2D echo. When the patient is cyanotic or the patient comes with cough, patient comes in shock, so you have to differentiate what shock it is. Again, a lung ultrasound makes a big difference. Pericardial pathologies and pleural pathologies. With this small introduction, I hand over the session to Dr. Shweta to enlighten us about the importance of lung ultrasound. Shweta.
Thank you, sir. Now, at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Raghunath sir, Dr. Lakshmikant sir, and the whole team of Impact for giving me this opportunity. So today we'll be discussing about lung ultrasound in critically ill, also called as LUCI. So as physicians who have been working in, be it the setting of emergency care or intensive care, I think lung is one of the most common organ system, or respiratory system is the most common organ system that we come across on a regular basis. And many of the tests or the examination that we do are not very specific. Like you can see, when I have crepitations. Yes, sir?
Hello, sorry to interrupt. Share your slides, madam. Now we got it.
Yes, sir. Can you see it now, sir?
Yeah. Yes, madam. Yes.
Yeah, so whenever we examine a patient, when we find a particular clinical finding, we are not very sure exactly what that finding belongs to. Like, for example, in case of Krebs, it could be because of pulmonary edema, it could be bronchitis, it could be COPD, or it could be ARDS. So when in a setting like this, and especially when we're dealing with emergency and critically ill patients, we want something where something shows us definitely and immediately that this is the pathology. So But when we get the X-ray done, it might look something like this. And it has been proven that the chest X-ray done in a critical care setting, they are suboptimal in almost more than 30% of the cases. The reason, one of the main reason is they are AP view X-rays. It's taken with the patient lying supine. So in comparison with the PA view, it is definitely suboptimal. And also because of inadequate inclusion, inadequate exposure, inadequate penetration. So when you get an X-ray like this, you see so many of these airspace shadowing here. It could be because of effusion, it could be pneumonia, it could be ARDS, it could be so many other things. So what do we think of next? So the gold standard for imaging of the lung is considered to be CT. But as we all know, we need to shift the patient, a critically ill patient, to a CT suite, which could be risky in itself. So what's the solution? So the next solution would be a lung ultrasound in critically ill, that is LUCI, which is much more sensitive than the chest X-ray or the clinical examination. But this was not the picture before. Earlier, it was, since the lung or the thorax is made up of the rib cage and the aerated lung, that is air and bone, both of which are considered to be the enemies of the ultrasound. So it was never ever thought that lung ultrasound could be done. And this was the state till almost the 1990s. And even Harrison itself states the same, which was a statement which was only removed in the 18th edition in 2012. So how did all this start? I think we have to thank Dr. Daniel Lichtenstein. He's a French intensivist. In 1991, he came up with this paper on lung ultrasound. He's described almost all the signs that we see today in lung ultrasonography, along with most of the protocols, that is the blue protocol, the false protocol, which most of us follow. He's the one who's behind it. In brief about the principles of ultrasound. So what exactly is this ultrasound machine that we use? When we have the probe that we have in hand, it's actually made up of piezoelectric crystals, which on vibration produce sound waves. So when we place the probe on the patient, the sound waves travel through the person's body through various tissues. And each of the tissue has a different resistance to this ultrasound. So what we call it as the acoustic impedance of the tissue. So when the sound waves pass through the tissue, they pass through various tissues and they get reflected back at the tissue interfaces. So when two tissues which have different acoustic impedance lie next to each other, there is some amount of reflection that happens from the interface. So that is the echo that the probe receives, and the echo which it receives back is transmitted to the ultrasound machine, and which displays it in the form of an image. Like you can see here, the most commonest tissue that we see is the soft tissue, the middle one, which is seen as gray. Why is it seen as gray? Because these are the incident sound waves which reach the tissue. Part of them get transmitted, part of them get reflected. So it appears gray. And based on the different tissues and differing acoustic impedance, it could be different shades of gray. What about liquid? So when the ultrasound waves pass through a liquid, it could be blood, it could be effusion fluid, it could be aseptic fluid. When it is incident, when the waves are incident on the fluid, what the fluid does is it transmits almost all the waves further and reflects very little of it, little of the waves. So it appears black, or in other words, we call it anechoic shadow. About fibrous tissue, it reflects a lot of the waves and it transmits very few waves beyond it. That is why it appears white. Bone has a very typical appearance. That is because it has this periosteal lining here. The waves incident on it reflect back to the machine. And since it does not transmit any waves further, there is a shadowing behind the periosteal line that we see. So hence, this has a white line followed by an acoustic shadow behind the periosteum. Coming to the air. In the lung ultrasound, we come across the aerated lung. Very important to know what sort of shadow air produces. Now in the sound wave, so there is a lot of disturbance. Yeah, so when the sound waves are incident on the air interface, tissue air interface, air reflects and also dissipates a lot of the sound waves which are incident on it. So what happens, because it is rapidly reflecting those waves, the waves travel back and forth between the probe and the air tissue interface, which results in something like this. This is a reverberation artifact that we see when we come across air in the ultrasound. So these are the artifacts. So like I said, it is lung scan is nothing but the study of artifacts. So these form the basis of the ultrasound in lung. The ultrasound, like I said, when the beam is incident on the thorax, the aerated lung will not be seen because there is air here. So what we see is only an artifact. So as long as the lung is aerated, we do not see the lung. But we do see the lung when it is consolidated or when there is fluid collection within the lung parenchyma or interstitium. And hence, whatever shadows we see back on the machine is actually the image of the interface between the pleura and the lung. The acoustic space, the intercostal space acts as the acoustic window. Hence, when we're doing a lung scan, these are the three important points that we need to note. One is we see the state of aeration. So if the lung is well aerated, we get a normal lung image, which we'll be discussing later. If there is interstitial fluid, we get something like an interstitial syndrome on the lung ultrasound. If there is consolidation, we get a consolidation image on the lung ultrasound. And also we can assess the ventilation. So as lung is a dynamic organ, because the patient is breathing while you're scanning. So it keeps moving up and down. So that is what we can assess during ventilation. And we can also see the collection. We can see the collection of fluid, whether in the pleural space or in the parenchyma itself. So these are the advantages of the lung ultrasound. We know it is safe, it is non-invasive, and it is radiation-free. It is easily repeatable. We can do it almost for every patient on a regular basis. It is low cost. It is portable. It is a bedside point-of-care machine. You don't need to shift the patient anywhere else to image the lung. And it is rapid. And it is very, very sensitive. So this is the role of CT in LUCI in diagnosis. As you can see, pneumothorax almost has 100% in sensitivity, specificity, positive and negative predictive value. Hence 100% diagnostic this thing is there with LUCI in case of pneumothorax, and there are various other conditions. We'll discuss this one by one. So what are we going to see today? First, I'll discuss about how we are going to scan a patient. Next, what are you going to look for when you're scanning? How do you integrate the information that you get into a clinical picture? And what are the pitfalls of lung ultrasound? First of all, how do you scan? So to scan, the first thing you need is an ultrasound machine. To do a lung ultrasound, any basic ultrasound machine will do. You don't need any of the higher properties or higher features are not needed for a lung ultrasound. And other thing you need to keep in mind is the newer machines have a lot of artifact suppression software in them, which are not helpful when you're doing lung ultrasound, because in lung ultrasound you want the artifacts to be seen clearly. You don't want them attenuated. So we need to suppress all the artifact reduction softwares like harmonics, filters, image optimization, etc. And the other thing you need is a good trolley so that it can be moved from bedside to bedside, and it needs to have a good, very fast startup time. That is so that in case of emergency, you can immediately switch it on and get ahead with your scanning. So you've switched on the machine. So the first thing you need to select is a preset. So if you have the option of a preset, that is, preset is a set of settings in the machine that is specific for different areas of the body. So in case the lung preset is not available in the ultrasound machine, you can select an abdominal preset. That works fine too. So what's the probe that you select? The curvilinear probe is considered a universal probe for lung ultrasound because you can visualize the pleura, you can visualize the deeper lung, you can visualize the diaphragm, everything in a curvilinear probe. But linear probe is considered very good, especially if you have doubt about the pleural sliding or the pleural thickness or regarding the pleural subpleural abnormalities. You can use the linear probe, which is very specific for looking at the pleura. The phased array probe is also used. The images produced are a little different compared to these, but the pictures in this presentation are mainly the ones with the curvy linear probe. So you have the probe in hand. How are you going to place it? So there are two ways. One is you can either place them longitudinal, that is you're cutting through the intercostal space, or you can have it oblique or in between the intercostal spaces. The most common one which is done is the longitudinal one. So what are the modes that you need to use? Lung ultrasound is not at all as complicated as an echocardiography or even a Doppler vessel imaging, because you don't need anything. You just need two modes. You need the basic 2D mode on the ultrasound, and you need an M mode. What does M mode mean? M mode is the motion mode. What the machine does is, when you select a line like this across the image, what the machine does is it looks for the movement at all the various points along that line, and it displays a graph like this, which denotes the movement along that line. This scan is actually of that of the diaphragm, and you can see the diaphragm movement at this level. So next, what do you do? What depth do you select? Normally 8 to 10 centimeter depth is sufficient, but if you're trying to visualize something deeper, you can increase the depth. For obese patients, it's much more, and for lean patients, you can keep it at only 6 to 8 centimeters. The gain has to be adjusted well. In a lung ultrasound, you can see here that this is a lower gain, this is a very high gain, and this is an optimum gain. But for lung ultrasound, you need to adjust the gain in such a way that your pleural line is clearly visible. Focus, usually this is the focus, that is, this is the focus on the screen. So you can either set it at the pleural level, or if you're looking for a pathology like a consolidated lung, you want to see it better, you can shift the gain down. So, okay, so now where do you place the scan? Do you scan only the anterior part? Do you scan it laterally or posterior part? So one thing you have to remember when you're doing lung ultrasound is you're only visualizing the part of the lung where you've placed the probe. So when you place the probe in the lower part, lower basal section, you're only visualizing that part. It may not hold good for rest of the lung or to the other lung. So what you need to do is a systematic examination of the lung, all the various regions of the lung. Just like how we auscultate the lung, you auscultate all the zones and all the lobes. The same way you need to scan all the zones. But in case of an emergency, there is a 6-zone protocol. This is what you follow in a blue protocol. That is, what you need to do is there are only 3 points: the upper blue, the lower blue, and the lateral PLAPS point. So what are these? Imagine a patient lying supine. What you need to do is you place your palm below the clavicle. This holds good for an adult patient. Actually, what is described is you need to place the palm the size of the patient, the size of the patient's palm. Adults, you can think that, okay, your palm is kind of equal to the other person's. But when you're doing a pediatric scan, it has to be based on that, the patient's palm size. So you place the palm below the clavicle, you place the second palm below the first one. So the midpoint of your first palm is the upper blue, and the midpoint of your lower palm is your lower blue. For the PLAPS point, it is the point of intersection between the posterior axillary line and the lower blue point. So that forms the PLAPS point. These are the 3 zones you scan in an emergency. That is a patient with acute dyspnea. Quickly you scan these 3 areas to know the cause. There is another 12-zone protocol, which is a detailed examination, especially useful for patients who are in the ICU. So this 12 zones that you scan are the anterior superior, anterior inferior, lateral superior, lateral inferior, and posterior superior and posterior inferior. Many a times, a critically ill patient on ventilator, you may not be able to scan the posterior superior and inferior part. If it is possible to tilt the patient laterally, that is fine. If not, you need to at least scan these 4 regions. So these are the zone boundaries. As you can see, the superior and inferior are divided by the 4th rib. So the part above the 4th intercostal space is superior. The part below it is the inferior. So you know how to scan. So what are you going to look for? First, these are the 10 basic signs which were described by Dr. Daniel Lichtenstein when he produced the paper on lung ultrasound. So as you can see, the first 3, that is the bat sign, the A line, and the lung slide, are the this thing that you see normally. These are present in a normal lung. B lines can also be present in a normal lung. 1 or 2 in the posterior regions are accepted. The quad sign and the sinusoid sign are seen in the pleural effusion, stratosphere and lung point in pneumothorax, fractal and lung sign in case of consolidation. So we'll discuss this one by one. But what I want you to remember is understand the pathology behind the views. You understand why you're getting that image is very important. Only then, when multiple images, like, when you have a configuration of multiple pathologies, like you may get a fractal sign and you may get a quad sign, plus you will get a stratosphere sign maybe in a patient. So that it means that the patient could have a consolidation along with the hydropneumothorax or something like that. So understand the pathology and the mechanism behind why the images are produced, then you'll be able to integrate it better clinically. So these are some other signs that we see. I'll discuss them one by one. So how is a normal lung seen? So as you can see in this, you have the skin, you have the subcutaneous tissue, you have the rib, the transverse section. This is, imagine that you're cutting the thorax in the coronal plane, okay? So, and you see the ribs here, you see the intercostal muscles here, and you see the 2 pleural lines. That is, this is the parietal pleura and this is the visceral pleura. And below this is a completely aerated lung. So like I said, when you have an aerated lung, when you get air on the way of the ultrasound waves, all of them get reflected back, and whatever you see underneath is just an artifact. It is not the actual tissue. So when you place the probe like this, what you see is, here you see the subcutaneous tissue, you see the ribs. Like I said, there's an acoustic shadowing below the ribs because it's bone, and you see the intercostal muscles here, okay? And below that you see a white line which reflects back all the sound waves, and the waves keep reverberating back and forth, causing an artifact called as the A lines, okay? So these are the A lines. What are the properties of the A lines? This is found in a normal lung, okay? You can see the rib shadows here, you can see the subcutaneous tissue, you can see the intercostal muscle. This is the pleural line, and these are the A lines, which are horizontal lines which are reverberations of this line itself. So this is not the actual lung, it is only the artifact that you're seeing, okay? So these are the properties. These are reverberation artifacts. These are motionless, that is, they don't move, they're regularly spaced, they're horizontal, and they gradually fading. So the next normal sign that you see in a next sign you see in a normal lung is a bat sign. Bat sign is just a name to remember. It looks like a bat, that is the rib shadow looks this way, and you see the intercostal space here. So it's just a way to remember the sign. It appears like a bat with its 2 wings, widespread wings, okay? So that is the bat sign, which is seen in a normal lung. So when you have a bat sign and you put an M mode across this space, what do you see? When you put an M mode here, what you see is this picture, okay? So this is called as a seashore sign. So these are the waves and this is the beach. Now these waves are from the intercostal space and the subcutaneous tissue, and the aerated lung gives the appearance of the sand on the beach. So this is the seashore sign, which is a sign, M mode sign of the normal lung. This is one more thing you see in a normal lung. Like I said, lung is dynamic, so it keeps sliding back and forth. So this to and fro movement of the pleural line, this twinkling line that you see, is called as lung slide. What it indicates is, it indicates that the lung is aerated, one. The second thing is the ventilation is happening. So these are the 2 things that you can infer from a sliding pleural line. So the normal lung that you see, this is the liver and this is the lung space, and this is the diaphragm. You can see it separating. You can see this dynamically like this. So what you see is, you can see the liver here, you can see the diaphragm here, and you can see the lung coming in, going out. This is called as a curtain sign. The lung, as it keeps expanding and retracting, it covers the liver like a curtain. So it's called as a curtain sign. So this is about the normally aerated lung. So what are the pathologies that can happen? One is you can have fluid here in the interstitium. The other one is you can have fluid here in the pleural space. You can have air in the pleural space. You can have some solid tissue here in the lung parenchyma. You can have air in the subcutaneous space. So all of these pathologies lead to a typical picture on the lung ultrasound. So when you have interstitial edema, secondary to either pulmonary edema or there is thickening of the septae, secondary to pulmonary fibrosis or ARDS, what you see is this. That is your lung wave. This is a typical normal picture. That is, you see subcutaneous tissue, intercostal space, etc., and the rib shadowing. Okay, and then what you see is because of this air fluid interface here, it causes a rapid reverberation artifact leading to the formation of these vertical lines which extend to the bottom of the screen. Okay, and so these are called as B lines or lung rockets or comet tail appearance. Okay, comet tails. Okay, so what is this? So how do you know that it's a B line? One thing is they are vertical, okay, and they extend from the pleural line to the end of the screen because they are artifacts, so they have to extend up to the end of the screen. Irrespective of how much depth you've kept, it will extend up to the end of the screen. They are hyperechoic, they're vertical, they're laser-like, they're discrete, and they move with respiration. So along with the lung sliding, they move and they do not fade. So the next pathology that is possible is you can have an effusion. So the moment you have an effusion, there is a fluid here which is nearly anechoic. Okay, so what happens when the sound waves are incident on this part? This part gives an anechoic image. So your lung, your tissue or fluid air interface is moved further down. Okay, so your interface is somewhere here. So what happens? This is an anechoic image and your aerated lung is here. So your artifacts start here from this point. Beyond this point is artifact. Here what you see is actually the pleural fluid. So how do you recognize it? This is a normal 2D mode. Okay, you're actually you've placed the probe longitudinally. You see the two rib shadows, you see the subcutaneous tissue, you see the intercostal muscles here, and below the intercostal muscle what you see is a clear fluid or an anechoic fluid here, and you see the lung tissue below that. Okay, so when you draw two lines this way against the two pleurae and against the ribs, what you get, it looks like a quadrilateral, hence it's called as quad sign. And the other thing you find in a pleural effusion is a sinusoid sign. When you place an M mode across this image, you see this. This is the pleural fluid. This is the lung moving up and down. So the criteria for the sinusoid sign to be seen is the underlying lung has to be aerated. Only then will you get this sinusoid sign. So next pathology that can be is there is air in the pleural space. So when there is air in the pleural space, what happens? The parietal pleura and the visceral pleura are not approximating. Hence, you will not see the slide of the lung. You will not see the lung moving back and forth. So when you image it this way, you can see that the A lines start right below the parietal pleura. Okay, and you will not see any lung slide. So this is how it looks. So this is concentrate on this on the right side. You can see the lung sliding to and fro. Okay, now we see on this side, you do not see any to and fro movement here. This is a static lung. Okay, it could be because of pneumothorax. There are various other pathologies also which lead to absent lung sliding. Pneumothorax is one. It could be a bleb there, or it could be in case of high frequency ventilation, you may not be able to see. If it's a massive atelectasis, the lung may not be sliding. So anything that leads to absent ventilation in the lung can lead to an absent lung sliding. So when you have an absent lung sliding and you put an M mode, okay, you put an M mode here, what do you see? Normally here you would see on the right side, you will see a seashore sign. But when you put it on the left side image, when there is absent lung sliding, you see what is called as a barcode sign. That is, there is no waves and beach, but you see just just horizontal lines this way looking like a barcode or a stratosphere sign. So this is what you find when the lung slide is absent, and most commonly in case of pneumothorax. Now coming to lung point. So what do you mean by a lung point? It is pathognomonic of lungs, pneumothorax. So if you see a lung point on the ultrasound, you're 100% sure that it is a pneumothorax. How does this happen? So imagine a patient is lying supine. Okay, all the air gets collected on the non-dependent part. Okay, the lung is pushed towards the hilum. It could be posteriorly or towards the hilum. So when you scan, start scanning from the parasternal area. You see no lung sliding here. Then you keep sliding. You keep coming laterally, scan. At a point, you see that you can see the lung slide on one side and no lung slide on the other. Okay, and when you put an M mode across this is what you can see. You can see the normal seashore sign on one side and you can see the barcode on the other. So this is pathognomonic of pneumothorax. So, okay, so the next pathology is there is some consolidation in the lung. Okay, this consolidation can be because of infarction. It could be infection, most commonly infection, infarction. It could be bleeding or contusion, etc. So what happens is this air interface, which is normally seen in a normal lung, gets moved here. Okay, so the ultrasound waves reach the solid area and then they get reflected back from this air interface here. Hence, what you get is you see a solid area here, the gray area, and then below that is your air interface. Hence, you get a shred sign or a fractal sign. So this is how it appears. As you can see here, you can see that there is a part of the lung which is solidified. Okay, so this is a consolidation. It resembles the spleen. Okay, and you see the shredding here. This is because the interface has been shifted from here to here, and below this you see the artifacts. Similar picture here. And this is a dynamic scan. You can see this whole thing is a consolidated lung, and this is the air tissue interface, hence the artifacts below that. So this is what you find in a non-translobar pneumonia. Okay, non-translobar, that is, it doesn't extend through and through the lung tissue. If it does, you will not be able to see this because you don't have any air in the lung at all, because the whole tissue is solidified. So that is when you find a lung sign or a tissue sign. So this hepatization of the liver, hepatization of the lung, that is, it looks exactly like the liver. Through and through, it's a solid organ. Okay, so this is actually the lung. You're actually seeing the lung only in this situation. So that is why it's called as a lung sign. Otherwise, it's only the artifacts, right? So that is why it's called the lung sign or the tissue sign. So these are the causes of consolidation. So there's one more thing, like the one movement that you see when you're doing the scan is the lung slide. Okay, that is to and fro movement. There's one more movement that you can see, which is the lung pulse. Okay, this is not a to and fro movement, but the lung has this pulse, like the cardiac pulsations get transmitted through the solidified lung or a consolidated lung. So you get that up and down movement, which is a lung pulse. This is a to and fro lung slide. So what happens in subcutaneous emphysema? Subcutaneous emphysema, there is a lot of air in the subcutaneous tissue itself. So since the interface is shifted much more superficial, you cannot see anything below the interface. So what happens? Because this air is interspersed between the soft tissue, you again have these reverberation artifacts which extend from the subcutaneous tissue itself to the end of the screen. Okay, so these are very similar to B lines, but one thing you have to remember is you do not see any rib shadow here. Okay, and there will not be any lung sliding because it is much more superficial to the level of the lung. So they are reverberation artifacts. These are called E lines. Okay, so there are reverberation artifacts. They are hyperechoic, they are vertical. Okay, but the most important thing you have to remember is this. That is, you do not see any pleural line, you do not see any lung sliding, and you do not see a bat sign. So there's something called a C line. These are indicative of the small consolidation in the subpleural region. Okay, and these are irregular lines which are present just below the pleural line. Okay, these are commonly seen in ARDS patients or even in pneumonia patients. So whenever they present anteriorly, they signify a C profile, which I'll be talking about later. Okay, there is one more thing called as Z line. So these are vertical lines again, they are hyperechoic. But the one thing you need to know is these are present in a normal lung first. Second thing, they do not obliterate the A lines. A lines are still visible. Whereas with B lines totally obliterate the A lines. Okay, and they're fading. They do not reach up to the end of the screen. Okay. So now we know the signs that we're going to look for. How are we going to integrate it clinically? Okay, so this is the most important thing about lung ultrasound. So when you see all these signs, you reach a sonographic diagnosis. That is, you either reach the diagnosis of a consolidation or an interstitial syndrome, or you can call it an effusion or a pneumothorax. That's a sonographic diagnosis. Now this again has many causes and there are different diagnoses from there, and there are a few features you need to look into so that you can differentiate between the different types of causes of the sonographic diagnosis. So this is the clinical integration. The one more important thing you need to remember is when you've scanned the lung, you need to actually visualize the whole lung in your mind and have a mental picture of what could be the pathology in the various different parts of the lungs. So these are the sonological diagnosis that you can reach. The interstitial syndrome again has different causes. That is, you can only say that there is interstitial syndrome. Unless you look further, when you have B lines, you say it's interstitial syndrome, but you have to look for other small changes which will help you differentiate between the cardiogenic cause, ARDS or ALI or pulmonary fibrosis. And when you have a consolidated lung, it could be because of pneumonia, atelectasis or lung contusion. So we'll just go ahead about how you're going to differentiate between the different causes. So first of all, pleural effusion. As you can see, the diagnostic accuracy of the lung ultrasound, that is LUCI, in a mechanically ventilated patient is almost 94.9%, and in non-mechanically ventilated patient it is about 78.6%. So you can see here, I mentioned the quad sign and the sinusoid sign. You don't see any quad sign here. Why is that? Because the effusion is a higher volume effusion, okay, and it has pushed the lung upwards, and you can see this whole anechoic shadow that you see is the pleural effusion, and you can see this lung flapping in this thing. This is called as a jellyfish sign. There are many names given. You don't have to remember all, but the most important thing is you need to know what pathology underlies the ultrasound probe. So these are the signs that you see. So what else, what other information can you get from a lung ultrasound? So the lung ultrasound will help you in knowing what's the volume of the pleural effusion in the lung, okay, within the pleural space. So the formula which is most commonly used is 16 into the, you multiply, you measure the distance from at the mid diaphragmatic level, you measure the distance between the, you have to actually freeze the image and measure. You use the calipers, you measure from the parietal pleura to the visceral pleura. This distance in millimeter multiplied by 16 will give you the estimate of the volume of pleural effusion. In ultrasound, you can detect volumes as low as 20 ml. But a standard, in comparison with the standardized chest X-ray in PA view, you need a minimum volume of 200 ml is needed to actually see it on the X-ray. And in a patient who is supine and you're seeing an AP view, the pleural effusion may go up to 500 ml before it gets detected on the chest X-ray. So you can see that ultrasound is a much better imaging modality for evaluating if the patient has effusion or not. So other thing you can see is, you can see if it's a simple or a complex effusion. What do you mean by simple? It's a completely anechoic shadow. But if you see some heterogeneous changes, you see some shadows moving about in the fluid, or if you see some septations, it could be an exudative collection. The other thing you need to remember is how do you differentiate between an effusion and an ascites? Initially, it might seem a bit confusing, but the diaphragm helps you. Whatever collection is above or behind the diaphragm is the pleural effusion, and whatever is between the diaphragm and the liver is your ascites. You can see the same thing here. This is the effusion and this is the ascites. Okay, there is something called as hematocrit sign. So when you have a hemothorax, what happens is the RBC settle into the costophrenic recesses here, and this can give rise to a hematocrit sign. And if you move the patient, you can see some moving shadows within the effusion. The other way ultrasound helps is it helps in thoracocentesis. You can actually select the site for effusion, for tapping, for doing the thoracocentesis. You can measure the distance from the skin to the pleural fluid, so you know what size needle you need to use, how deep you can go, and you also you can know whether you can do a diagnostic tap or not. So there is one criteria for a diagnostic tap. And you can do it only if the distance between the parietal and the visceral pleura is more than 1.5 centimeters. If not, then there are higher chances of you puncturing the lung, etc. And also you can monitor the post-procedure, you can monitor if the patient has developed pneumothorax post-procedure by using the ultrasound. So coming to pneumothorax. Pneumothorax is one condition which has the ultrasound has almost 100% diagnostic accuracy in a mechanically ventilated patient and 97.6% in a non-ventilated patient. So what are the signs that you see in case of a pneumothorax? Like I said, there is absent lung sliding. Okay, you see A lines, there is no lung slide. And when you put an M mode, you see a barcode sign. Okay, this is the basic for pneumothorax. There are a few other things you need to keep in mind. Before you say it's a pneumothorax, there are few points. One is B lines should be absent. Even if you see a single B line in that image, you can rule out pneumothorax. That is because if you see a B line, that means your ultrasound wave has gone beyond the pleural space and it has reached the lung. So if it has reached the lung, that means there is no air in the pleural space. So even a single blue line can rule out pneumothorax, and you should not be able to see any lung pulse. But that is the same thing. That is, if you see a lung pulse, that means the ultrasound waves have gone beyond the interpleural space and reached the lung. So you can again rule out pneumothorax. So it is absent lung slide, absent B lines, absent lung pulse, and the stratosphere or barcode sign on the M mode. But what confirms the diagnosis of pneumothorax is the presence of lung point. Like I said, you keep moving laterally. You can see here, this is a lung point on a 2D mode. That is, you see the lung slide here, absent lung slide here. Okay, so that means you've reached this part and you're scanning this part. So this part has no slide and this part has slide. Okay, and you see the change in the M mode. Okay, this is the lung point, which is pathognomonic of pneumothorax. But again, there are a few conditions where you don't find the lung point at all, but still the patient has pneumothorax. Okay, which I'll just tell you now. So when you have an unstable patient, what's the quickest thing that you can do? Just put the probe on the anterior blue lines, the two blue lines. If you don't see lung slide, don't see B lines, don't see lung pulse, you can definitely rule in pneumothorax. But if you see any of them, you can rule out PNX. This is at the blue points, okay? Only at the anterior part. But there are a few confusing things, like when you keep doing scans, you realize that some patients, they don't have a lung slide, they don't have B lines, they don't have lung pulse, but still they don't have pneumothorax. So this is a bit, you might get confused, but keep in mind that if you see either of these three, you can rule out pneumothorax. If you don't see these three and you see the lung point, you can confirm pneumothorax. But what about you don't see any of them? It could be because a picture like this, that is, your pneumothorax is so big that it has collapsed and pushed the lung towards the hilum. So you may not be able to see the lung point as well. In this image, it's this much, but it could have pushed further towards the hilum. So then you don't find any B lines, you don't find any lung slide, you don't find any lung pulse, and you don't find a lung point as well. Okay, so this is a complete pulmonary collapse. So what about this? So like I said, if you see either of them, you can rule out pneumothorax. So this is, and one more thing is, like, you can quantify the pneumothorax as well based on the location of the lung point. So if a lung point is anterior, that means it's a mild pneumo. If it's lateral, it's moderate. And if it's towards the posterior part, that means it's a tension pneumo. There are a few other points, like a double lung point can be present when the pneumothorax is when it's only septate pneumothorax. You can find one lung point anterior and lung point posterior. You can find a hydro point in a hydropneumothorax. So coming to the next sonologic diagnosis, that of an interstitial syndrome. Like I said, when you have fluid or edema in the septate, you get an interstitial syndrome, which is again graded. It could be a mild or a severe. When it is mild, it is only the interstitium which is edematous. If it reaches the alveoli as well, then it's a totally white lung that you see. So this is a cardiogenic, this could be because of cardiogenic pulmonary edema, acute lung injury or ARDS, or pulmonary fibrosis. And the diagnostic accuracy in a mechanically ventilated patient of lung ultrasound is 88.4% and 78.6% in a non-mechanical ventilated lung. So this is the picture that you find. You see, so when do you say it is interstitial syndrome? When you see B lines on the ultrasound. Okay, so this is the picture you see. You see these B lines moving back and forth, okay, starting from the pleural line, extending up to the end of the screen. So this is indicative of interstitial or alveolar edema. So within one interspace, if you find more than 3 B lines, that means it is positive region. And when you do the scan of the entire, both the lungs, if you find more than or equal to 2 regions positive for B lines out of 8, then you can call it as interstitial syndrome. So when it is because of cardiogenic pulmonary edema, what are the features you see? You see it is a homogeneous distribution of the B lines. It is bilateral. It is more on the dependent in the sense, if the patient is sitting up, it is in the lower part, the dependent lower region. If the patient is supine, you can see it more in the posterior part. And there is absent, the pleura is normal, so you don't see any pleural abnormality, and you can see the lung slide. So this is one way of quantifying the B lines. Okay, this is a semi-quantitative assessment because you're interpreting the image into a number. So that is why it is semi-quantitative. So how do you do this? When you put the probe on the interspace, you see the area. Like if 30%, if you don't find any B lines, the score is 0. If you find around 30% of the space occupied by B lines, then the score is 3. Like you divide that by 10, the score is 3. If you find 70% of the space occupied by B lines, then the score is 7. If you find a completely white lung where the B lines are coalescent, then it's a score of 10. So you score each of these regions, each intercostal space, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th in each of these lines, okay? And you get a final score. So then the score is again indicative of the amount of extravascular lung water present in the lung. Like I said, this is a score of 0, this is a score of maybe 4, and this is a score of 7 to 8, and this is a 10 because you see a completely white lung here. Okay, so how is this helpful? This actually is very useful for monitoring a patient with pulmonary edema. Okay, you know the patient has this thing, his score is somewhere around 30-35 on admission. You give him a diuretic overload, you give him a diuretic load, and then you go on monitoring how much of the B lines have disappeared, and a decrease in the score will indicate that your therapy is effective. So you see, so the next condition where you see the B lines is in ARDS or ALI. So how do you differentiate between the cardiogenic and the ARDS? In ARDS, you see a lot of these pleural line abnormality, and you see these small consolidations below the pleural line, okay? And there is a lot of irregularity of the pleural line. And another important point you need to know is, at times the lung sliding may be absent in a few of these regions because the lung is not well aerated. And other thing is, you can see spared areas which are almost normal looking areas, like you can see in this image. There are B lines here. There is a part here is kind of spared of B lines. So this is a spared area. So this is very typical of ALI or ARDS. How about pulmonary fibrosis? Again, history plays a very important role. You know that it's a chronic condition. Okay, and these pneumogenic B lines are also bilateral. They start in the posterior part, irrespective of whether the patient is supine or sitting. And one more thing, what you see is you can see some fragmented, the pleural line abnormalities are present. There is pleural thickening. Normally it is around 0.2 mm. If it is more than 0.5 mm, it is considered thickened pleural line. And you can see some fragmented pleural lines as well in pulmonary fibrosis. So the next diagnosis is a consolidation. Like I said, it could be because of any of these. And the diagnostic accuracy is 89.1% in mechanically ventilated and 73.8% in non-mechanically ventilated patient. The most common cause is usually infection. In a case of trauma, it is contusion. It could be atelectasis in a ventilated patient, so we need to be very careful about that. And tumor and pulmonary embolism as well. So how do you differentiate between these? You see this shred sign and the lung tissue sign in case of pneumonia. And the other important thing you need to keep in mind is the air bronchogram. So this patient has pneumonia. So there is consolidation of the alveoli, okay? But his bronchi are patent. Hence, when he's breathing, the air moves in and out of the bronchi. So you get these dynamic air bronchograms in a patient with pneumonia. But this is not the case in atelectasis. Atelectasis, whether it is obstructive or compressive. In obstructive, there is no air movement in the bronchi. Hence, there is no dynamic, there is a static bronchogram that you see. You do not see a dynamic air bronchogram. And even if in case of compression atelectasis, what happens is the air within the bronchi gets absorbed. So you do not see a dynamic air bronchogram in a atelectatic patient. So this is the typical picture of atelectasis. There is a static air bronchogram. You can see these bronchi are like empty. You do not see any air movement here. You can see a lung pulse because it's a consolidated lung. The cardiac pulsation get transmitted through this solid lung. So you see a lung pulse and you see a tissue sign. So lung contusion. So when there is a setting of lung contusion or trauma, there are many things you can find. You can find a pneumothorax, you can find a hemothorax, you can find a consolidated lung, could be because of contusion. Okay, and it's usually focal, multifocal based on the areas that are damaged, unilateral, bilateral. And you find pleural line thickening, which is irregular, subpleural tissue abnormalities will be present in case of lung contusion. So there is one more entity called as an A profile. So what do you mean by A profile? That is, you see in A profile, you see A lines, you see normal lung sliding, okay, and you do not see anything else. You don't see B lines, you don't see any of those, okay. And on M mode, you see a seashore sign, but still the patient is breathless. So it is in these situations that you come to the conclusion that patient could be having COPD or asthma. This you can differentiate based on the clinical findings and also based on your examination history. And pulmonary embolism also can lead to an A profile, and you can see the A profile in many of the spared areas. Like there's a patient with ARDS, you have scanned only some parts of the lung, you might be seeing the spared areas of the ARDS patient. So this is the picture. You see normal A lines, you see pleural line, you see lung slide, everything, and seashore on M mode. So in pulmonary embolism, there are few other things you need to do before you confirm that diagnosis. You need to have a positive DVT, venous Doppler has to be positive. You need to have raised pressures on the right side of the heart. The pulmonary artery pressure, the pulmonary pressure has to be increased, and the patient has acute respiratory failure. And you may find a few lung signs as well. It is not only A profile. You might find some wedge-shaped consolidation in the subpleural wedge-shaped consolidations, which are indicative of regions of infarctions. So all this we discussed till now is how you do a lung scan comprehensively. But in case of an emergency, you don't have this much time to scan every part of the lung, both by taking your time. So there are a few emergency protocols that are very helpful to know the diagnosis. So when you have an acute dyspneic patient, the blue protocol is the most commonly followed. So what you do is you only scan 3 parts per lung. That is both the upper and lower blue points and the PLAPS point. First, what you need to do is place the probe on upper and lower blue points of both the lungs. Okay. What you see is you look for lung slide. You see that there is a lung slide. Okay. And you see for the lines below the pleural line, if you see a predominantly A lines, that means it's an A profile. Okay. Then when you have an A profile in a patient who is severely dyspneic, the first thing you look for is you look for the venous, the peripheral veins. That is, sequential venous analysis needs to be done. If you find a thrombosed vein, then you've reached the diagnosis of pulmonary embolism. Almost like 99% you're sure it's pulmonary embolism, even before you've done the echo. But if you don't find any thrombosis in the veins, okay, so next immediately what you have to see is you have to do the PLAPS point ultrasound. In the PLAPS point, if you find any posterolateral alveolar pulmonary pleural syndrome, that is, if you see any effusion or a consolidation, then your diagnosis is pneumonia. If you don't see any of this, it is COPD or asthma. Okay. So the next thing, when you have done your so this is one stage. Okay, but you have done a lung slide. You see predominantly B lines. Okay, B profile. That is B profile. That is you have reached a diagnosis of pulmonary edema. You're checking the blue points and you do not find any lung sliding. Okay, and then you look beyond the pleural line. You see a predominantly A- profile. That is, you see a this thing. That is, you see A lines below the this thing. Okay, so then you look for a lung point, and if you find it, you're sure it is a pneumothorax. If you don't find a lung point, you need to evaluate the patient further. And the other thing that can happen is you might find an A profile on one lung and B profile on the other, or you may find a C line anteriorly. So if any of these are present, then the diagnosis is pneumonia. So the next protocol where lung ultrasound helps is in a false protocol. False protocol is fluid administration limited by lung ultrasound. Okay, so this is done in cases of acute circulatory failure. That is, the patient has come in shock. You need to differentiate between the 4 types of shock. Okay, so as soon as the patient has come, you see that there is no pulse. Immediately do a simple emergency cardiac sonography. Okay, so you visualize the cardia. What is if you see a tamponade or features of elevated right-sided pressures, then you've reached the diagnosis of obstructive shock, and you need to further manage the patient accordingly. But you do not find either of these signs, and then you do a lung scan. You check the blue points. If you think there is a pneumothorax, then that is the cause of your shock, that is obstructive shock. You don't find any of these, okay, but you see a B profile, okay, that is, you see a lot of B lines. That means the patient is in cardiogenic shock. Okay, you don't find any of these. You find a normal A profile. What you need to do is start administering fluid. You started administering fluid, you do the fluid resuscitation. If the patient improves clinically, then you've reached the diagnosis of hypovolemic shock. You've done the fluid resuscitation, but the B lines start appearing in the lung. That means this is the diagnosis of septic shock. Okay. There is something called a Sissing protocol, which is done to know the cause. If the patient has come in an arrested state, you need to know the cause immediately, so that causes like tension pneumothorax or a tamponade can be dealt with immediately and the patient can be revived. Okay, so this is what you do. The first thing you do is you do the lung ultrasound. If you see a B profile, then you know that it is a cardiac cause, which is the cause of cardiac arrest. No, you don't see B profile. You see an A dash profile, then pneumothorax. Okay, A dash is A profile with an absent lung slide. So the diagnosis is pneumothorax. But you see an A profile predominantly, then it could be hypovolemia or blood loss somewhere, which has led to the arrest. Okay, so that time you again give fluid resuscitation. So the next point you see is you look for DVT. Okay, if you find that, then you know that pulmonary embolism is the cause of arrest. Okay, if not that, then you look in the abdomen, you do a fast scan, you look if there is, you look for any bleeding. Okay, if it is there, then that is the cause of your cardiac arrest. The next point you see is you look for pericardial effusion. It could be tamponade. You immediately need to tap the tamponade, okay, for further management of the patient. Okay, so this is how the lungs scan can be incorporated into the protocol for shock as well as for cardiac arrest situations. So how do you report it? So there are many report forms that are available, or you can have one for your own ICU. Okay, where you have all the parts enumerated, you have each of the zones written, and then you can write, you need to write down whether the lung slide is present in each of them, what are the predominant lines that you see, whether it's a B profile or an A profile, whether you see any C lines or shred sign or anything like that. Okay, so this is very helpful for monitoring a patient on a day-to-day basis, especially for ICU patients. So this is a similar form. This is a much more easier and simplified form which can be adapted in most of the ICUs. So next, coming to the hot topic, that is COVID-19. So what is the role of ultrasound in COVID patients? As we know, COVID is mainly ARDS. Okay, so ARDS, this thing is, it is mainly a deaerated lung that you see. So this is the profile that you keep seeing as the patient gets worse and worse. Initially, it's an aerated lung. You see an A profile. Okay. As the patient keeps getting worse, you see many B lines. The B lines become coalescent, and then you see a consolidation. Okay, so based on the degree of aeration of the lung, you see the picture in COVID. So this is the scoring system which is used specifically for COVID-19 patients. 0 score for no B lines, 1 when you see less than 3 B lines, less than or 50% of the screen with no subpleural alterations. Like we know it is ARDS, so that is why you can expect subpleural alterations in these patients. 1P if it is present with subpleural alterations. 2 if it is more than 50% of the screen is filled with B lines. 2P if there are subpleural alterations along with that. 3 if a consolidation is present, or a pleural effusion is present. Commonly, pleural effusion is not seen in COVID patients. So you report it in this form. This is very helpful to know on a regular basis whether the patient is improving or worsening. There is another very important factor. Ultrasound can actually help you differentiate between the type L and the type H. The type L has a predominantly B profile. That is, you keep increasing, there are increasing B lines and they do not have a consolidation profile. This is type L. The type H have a more of a consolidative pattern. It helps in treating these patients as well. And how is it going to help in that? If you can see here, you see an abnormality. You see B lines or consolidation. Okay, you identify the pattern. If it's a predominantly diffuse B lines, then you know that he could be a possible PEEP responder. Okay, so you increase the PEEP and try to ventilate him. If you see a predominantly consolidation of or atelectasis pattern, then proning may help him. He could be a possible prone responder. And also it helps you in knowing the progression or resolution of the disease state. So role in weaning. Ultrasound helps you to detect these conditions like obstructive atelectasis, derecruited areas or effusions, which are the most common causes of failed weaning in ventilated patients. There are a few other things where the ultrasound helps. That is, it can predict the success of spontaneous breathing trial. So what you do is, first you do a lung scan, you get his aeration score, that is your B-line score, okay, and then you post him to SBT. Post SBT, you again do the B-line score. Okay, if you see that at the end of SBT, if his B-line score is less than or equal to 12, that means he is going to do okay after extubation. If it is more than 17, this predicts the likelihood of post-extubation distress. Okay, and it can also help you in deciding whether you want to use an NIV post-extubation or not. You can also do the diaphragm ultrasonography. Okay, during the SBT, you try to visualize the diaphragm. That is, what you need to do is you in the mid-axillary line, okay, along the fifth intercostal space where you can see the liver, place the probe longitudinally, okay, and try to see the posterior diaphragm, the posterior end of the diaphragm, okay, and at that point you put an M mode, okay, like the first image that I showed you, that it will show the movement of the diaphragm on M mode. If you see that the diaphragmatic descent is less than 10 mm, it predicts that there is a high rate of weaning failure. If it is more than 11 mm, it shows that there is no diaphragmatic dysfunction and the patient can be extubated. There's another thing to estimate the work of breathing. You can check for the fractional diaphragmatic thickening. For this, what you have to do is, in the mid-axillary line, place the probe longitudinally. You can see that the diaphragm is seen just deep to the intercostal space. At that point, you put an M mode and you look for the diaphragm thickness. Okay, if the then based on how much the diaphragm is thickening, you will know what is the work of breathing that the patient is doing, one, and also you can diagnose diaphragmatic dysfunction. So this is what I mentioned. This is the diaphragm ultrasonography on M mode. You can see that the movement of the diaphragm is around like 7.3 centimeter here and 2.36 centimeter here. So this can actually show you whether there is diaphragmatic dysfunction, and also during SBT, if this has to be more than 10 so that you can comfortably extubate the patient. So what are the limitations of ultrasound? The major limitation is obesity. Many a times if the patient is too obese and there is a very thick thoracic wall, the imaging may not be adequate or satisfactory. Subcutaneous emphysema, like I said, if there is air in the subcutaneous space, it does not show any images below that air interface. Dressing are another problem. Like if there is a lot of dressing on the thoracic wall, you may not be able to visualize any of the tissues underneath. The other problem with lung ultrasound is it can only detect the pathologies which are subpleural or near the pleura. If the pathology is somewhere in the located centrally near the hilum, the ultrasound will not be able to pick it up. But in critically ill patients, most of the pathologies that are present, most of the problems we come across are usually related to the pleura. Hence, this limitation does not hold good for critically ill patients, but definitely for patients who have a CA or a tumor somewhere here or a loculated effusion here, we may not be able to diagnose those on lung ultrasound. Hence, the role of Lucy in diagnosis, it is more sensitive, definitely more sensitive than chest X-ray, and it is also helpful in monitoring and treatment titration. You can check for the response to treatment, monitor the respiratory support needed, whether you need to increase the PEEP, decrease the PEEP, whether you need to give more fluids, decrease the fluids. All that can be decided based on your lung ultrasound. You can also decide the time of weaning of the patient. But whatever said and done, it is not a whole and soul. It has to be a holistic approach. You have to have a good history, good clinical examination. The ultrasound will definitely support you, support the diagnosis, and it will give you a very good picture of what could be happening within that thoracic cage. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Shweta, it was a really wonderful, elaborate presentation where you have covered most of the topics. You have highlighted the use of lung ultrasound in emergencies, differentiating pathologies, how you can use it for weaning, and more important is that you have to be regularly doing the scans so that you memorize the images of lung scan, and only then you can do a good interpretation. Again,
Yes.
I have seen no questions in the chat box, so I can conclude that either they have understood or they have not understood.
Yes, sir.
Any
Thank you, sir.
questions from the audience? Raghu? Lakshmikant sir?
Really, it's a very excellent presentation.
Thank
Yeah, Dr. Shweta, could you just please elaborate a little bit more on the fluid resuscitation part using ultrasound, the chart you mentioned?
Yes, sir. Actually, what we need to do is, in case of a shock,
You can put your slide.
so you want in a shock patient.
Yeah. Fluid resuscitation using ultrasound you mentioned. There's a chart.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, what you want to know is what is the cause of shock, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so once
No, I
you've
just
ruled
want to
out,
know this.
yes, sir.
Worsening B lines in the last one means septic shock. You mean the last one?
In the sense that you have already loaded intravascular. Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So what it means is you have already, the intravascular volume is sufficient. Okay. And it is, if the B lines start appearing, that means it has gone beyond the resuscitation phase. So you have to like.
Okay.
That's what she's trying to tell Lakshmikant, that now you can stop giving fluids and the role of vasopressors start.
Yes.
Yeah.
Start thinking of vasopressors.
Probably one is that you already adequately resuscitated.
Yes, you have
or it could be some maybe underlying cardiogenic etiology maybe there, which is probably worsening the
Yes, sir. There is one
Most
more
of the
point.
time, it's the integration between your lung ultrasound, your echocardiography, your
yes.
ultrasound. Yeah, you have to put everything in one thing.
Yes.
So there's one more thing you need to keep in mind, that when you resuscitate the patient in this way, like you're waiting till the blue lines appear, that means that you have pushed the patient towards the lateral end of the Frank-Starling curve. Okay, so actually when the blue lines start appearing and you start thinking of starting a vasopressor at that moment, you might have to de-resuscitate at that time, because a little more fluid than what the patient can do. You got my point, sir? Right.
Yeah, I got it. No, I just saw that septic shock. Like I was just thinking whether it could be still any septic with overflow. Yeah.
No, not septic exactly. It's a distributive shock.
Yeah. I got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Dr. Ravi sir want to ask. Dr. Ravi sir.
Yes, sir.
Shweta, it's a wonderful presentation. I think it is to the point. I'm just to congratulate you.
Thank you.
Just want to ask you, can you be able to visualize these IVCs and SVCs in your part?
Yes, sir. Definitely. IVC is the most common thing that we see. But since it was lung ultrasound, I didn't deal with IV. But yeah, that is definitely, you can see the collapsibility and all that. So that is the most important thing when you're like resuscitating and de-resuscitating a patient.
Yeah.
It is one.
And the other thing is the irregularity of the pleura. You said, right? What is
Sir?
the impaired irregularities of the pleura?
Yes, sir.
What
So
the
like importance, sir?
irregularities of the pleura, you said, right?
Yes, sir.
There is
Yes, sir.
irregular pleura will be there.
Yes, sir. The pleura is actually a white line that you keep on the ultrasound. You see it sliding up and back and forth. It is
That
kind
is
of seen.
that is disrupted sometimes.
Yeah, that's a normal pleura, sir. But the moment you see some cutoffs in the pleura, it is not very regular, or it keeps dipping up and down. If it keeps dipping up and down, that means there are small consolidations there, like just below the pleura. So which can indicate either ARDS, or if there is some thickening or irregularity of the pleura, it can indicate a pulmonary fibrosis, sir.
So configurating all these things can tell you ARDS.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely. Definitely. It's
mixture, in fact. It's a picture of mixture.
Yes, sir. You see different things in different zones. That is why scanning all the parts of the lung is very important. And you have to get a complete picture of the lung. Like you have to scan all the parts, and only then you get a proper picture. So based on that, you can decide what could be the pathology in the lung.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you
That's
so much.
one of the main thing, especially when you want to differentiate between an ARDS, ALI, and with the cardiogenic pulmonary edema is these B lines are homogeneous. They are consistent in either side of the lung. But in ARDS, they are inconsistent, sir. In different zones, they are different.
Yes.
And that's what it's a proud moment for Dr. Ravi, because when a student presents it so well, that's the best gift a student can give to a teacher, isn't it, sir?
This is absolutely right. We cannot imagine the way she has come up. Oh, wonderful. This is just wonderful. You have to come to my college once to present all those things. I'll call you.
Definitely, anytime.
Dr. Raghu?
Yes, sir. It was excellent presentation by Dr. Shweta, and we're really happy. The presentation came out very well, actually. So it was very clear, and students can take message very clearly. And there was no any technical problem also this time. Usually there will be a lagging will be there. There was no problem. Thank you so much, Dr. Shweta, for your valuable time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
One more, Dr. Karthik want to ask.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Karthik also want to ask one question. One question is there, sir. Shall I ask?
That's what Dr. Ashwin wants to know. He's doing a CSM protocol. While evaluating for tension pneumothorax is the first step, can we evaluate for tamponade at the step only rather than moving the probe from chest to femoral vein, then abdomen, then back to the chest?
Yeah, you can do it that way. Okay. Based on, actually what you have to do is you look at the history. Like the attenders will give you some sort of a history. When you know, the patient has been breathless for a while and then he arrested, then you can think of a pneumothorax, or you can think of a what do you say, pulmonary embolism. Okay, but if the patient wasn't breathless, he suddenly collapsed, okay, or he was, maybe he had a lot of edema, or he had cardiac issues or complaints, then you can actually think of a tamponade. And then, so it's like, when you're evaluating, you evaluate based on the patient, okay, and based on what probe you have in hand. What same protocol was told is, sir actually proposed, Dr. Daniel Lichtenstein, he proposed with a microconvex probe. He always recommends a microconvex probe, which is a convex probe with a very small footprint. And he uses that probe for everything. He uses it for lung ultrasound, he uses it for echo, he uses it for DVT, he uses it for everything. But I haven't seen that probe here, and I think it is available with many machine dealers. But the commonest probes that we see are the convex and the vascular probe. So whatever probe you have, whichever you can switch to next. Usually what I do is I use one probe, finish off whatever I need to do with that probe, and then like immediately switch to the next probe. So it depends on the convenience as well. And why the cardia was seen later is because you're giving chest compressions. someone is busy giving chest compressions, so you may not have access to the cardia for that time. So finish off the other thing and then last go to the cardia. That is one reason why this thing was mentioned later.
That is the argument me and Shweta. That is the argument me and Shweta always has. Shweta is comfortable with the curvy linear probe, and then she takes a echo probe. But I try to do everything: abdomen, thorax, and lung and heart with the 2D probe. That is a phased array probe.
For me, sir, like I cannot imagine lung ultrasound without my bat sign. I have to see those two acoustic shadows, and only then I can interpret what is in between. With the echo probe, I don't get to see that, so I find it very difficult.
Dr.
Yeah,
Karthik want to ask. Dr. Karthik want to ask some question. He was unmuted in between. Okay, I think he's not. Dr. Karthik, please.
He is not muted, unmuted.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, he is muted, unmuted now. Karthik? I think he's not there.
Dr. Lode sir is there. Welcome, Dr. Lode sir. Okay, sir. If there is no question, we'll end this session. Thank you so much, sir, Dr. Guru Prasad sir and Dr. Shweta madam, for your valuable time. It was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Your webinar, this will be recorded version, will be given to the students, and also
Yes.
this slides also will be given in the PDF format. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you all the listeners.
Thank you.
Today
Thank
it
you
was a
very,
well attended. Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
thank you very much.
Very,
All
sir.
the job you are doing it, I think, is unimaginable. Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We will leave the meeting, Anu.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We leave the meeting.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.